And one of our speakers is going to be replaced with a different speaker because she's sick. Let me introduce the speakers. Tom, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, good. Do you want to introduce the speakers, Tom?
Yes, so my name is Thomas Braun, better known as Brownie. I work for Swisstex for the last 26 years, and I have a pretty good experience with digital color.
Oh, sorry, Tom. There's more than one Tom. I was talking about the C2C chair, Tom Stutz.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries. I should have remembered there was more than one Tom. Just FYI, we are recording this meeting. If you do not wish to have your face on the recording, you can go ahead and mute your camera and participate in the chat function. Please save your questions until the end of the panel discussion because they're going to have a nice panel discussion today. Our speakers are going to be Kelly Mallory from Nativic, Carol Little from the North Face, Thomas Brownie, thank you, Tom, from Swisstex, and Brendan Roddy from Under Armour. Kelly, you're going to moderate today, aren't you?
Yes, I'll be leading this discussion.
Okay, I will turn it over to you and stop sharing right now.
Okay. So hi, everybody. So I am Kelly from Nativic, as Maria said. And today we're just going to talk to some of our brands and our suppliers about their color process and, you know, how to the journey that they've had and how they've simplified their color process. At Nativic, like our slogan is Color Simplified. We like to give solutions out there to help, you know, not just brands, but suppliers also simplify their color process. So we're going to kind of go through their journey, ask them questions about how they did it, what they do. And then, you know, definitely please, you know, have questions. You can write them in the chat. We'll get to them at the end. Or, you know, at the end, we'll ask you guys for questions if you have any for these brands. So to start off, so as she said, we have Carol from North Face. And we have Brendan from Under Armour here, and then Brownie from Swisstex from our supply chain side. So I guess I'm going to start off by just saying like a little bit, if you guys, you know, explain what one of the biggest things that impacted color, I think recently to make it more simplified is going digital. And, you know, Nativic has been around since 2008 and digital is not a new concept to people, but I do really feel like it has taken off recently. More so across the industry. Since the pandemic, it's been embraced more for people who are hesitant. So I kind of just want to hear a little bit about each of your guys' experience of moving from your traditional color process, reviewing color visually and into a digital data. And like, when did you do that? Why did you do that? Things like that. Anybody want to take it off? Who wants to start?
I can start.
Okay.
I'm Carol Little. Hopefully you can all hear me. I work for the North Face. I've been in this role as color manager for just over a year. And luckily for me, we kind of made that switch from visual lab dips to digital right as I was beginning the role as color manager. And there were quite a few hurdles and it was a little bit of a learning curve, much more so with regards to the integration of the ASAP or Nativic software with our PLM system and making sure that we were requesting the right lab dips and the right colors and the right materials. But once we figured that out and got that rolling, it's just made such a huge impact on our lab dipping process. And I'm sure I'll have the opportunity to speak to about it in more detail as we go into like, you know, how we've transitioned our suppliers over to using this system. But basically we're able to work with a fraction of the team that we worked with when Kelly was managing color for the North Face a couple of years ago.
I forgot to say that. I used to manage the color department at the North Face a while ago, and then I left and joined Nativic, and Carol took over.
but I mean, it's really changed things. We've gone, each season, we reduced the number of visual lab dips that our team has to review by about 50%. And we've been onboarding more of our suppliers so that we have just, about 10% of our fabrics that we're reviewing are not in ASAP or not in the system. So it's just really transformed our process, and we're able to do things a lot quicker, get to market a lot faster, because as we all know, color is one of the last things that gets confirmed for the line. And it's one of the things that's always changing. So we're able to adjust to those changes and still have colors approved in time for sales sample production and bulk production if that's the last resort. So
Carol, were you you kind of got forced into it, I guess, because it was already an established sort of process that was in the works as you came over. Was it like, were you nervous? Were you hesitant to like continue on with digital at all? Or were you
no, I was
full on ready to embrace it?
I was ready to embrace it. I think it's a great thing for our team to be working on. And what it does, and one of the hardest things about working in materials is color, because color is such a subjective thing, and there's a lot of people who get very, I guess, just they feel very, very strongly about color and colors not matching the standard. And so what the software and looking at color digitally has been able to do is remove that subjectivity from it and just be able to present, here's your color chart, here's where the standard falls, and here's where the summit that we approve falls, and it removes that subjectivity. So for me as a technical person who's, just been involved with the technical textile aspect for years, it was a warm welcoming, because it is always really difficult to tell somebody that the color that they think it is isn't necessarily the color that you're seeing through that digital monitor.
Yeah.
So yeah,
definitely. And Brendan, how about you? How was your experience of transitioning from visual to digital, whether that was at Under Armour or previously?
Yep. Yeah, so welcome, or good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brendan Roddy, working at Under Armour here for 7 years now. So I joined in 2015, right out of college, and I was fortunate that the CAP process was pretty ingrained in our color process when we started. So for me, I didn't really have a choice to adopt it or not, but it was kind of a no-brainer. Basically, as soon as I started, I would say our evolution, we've come a long way since I started. We relied, I would say, very, very heavily on the physical lab dips. So there were multiple people whose sole job was to receive, to log, to review, and then to kind of store all the lab dips. And we had a whole room. We had like multiple filing cabinets, and it became a very tedious process. Of tracking things down, purging old files, so requesting new ones that we may have missing. So over time, and as you kind of called out, COVID kind of forced our hand into more and more of the digital. But luckily, we already had that good foundation in place with CAP. So our product and design team were already, let's say, pretty well versed in the digital color space for a designer. We had kind of trained them on the importance of digital color and color measurements, and it definitely was a learning curve of getting them used to understanding that a CAP approved color is going to be a perfect match to the standard. But if you're able to show a few examples of that, and then over time they'll learn to trust you more and more.
Yeah.
So then over COVID, so parlaying the CAP process, that was obviously a huge advantage as we shifted into our work from home. So we parlayed that with something we call it the virtual summit process. So now I would say almost 99% of all of our color review is done either via spectrophotometer or using on-screen visual review. So that, I would say, has been very successful. We are able to take a photo of the sample next to the color swatch or color standard in all three light sources, and then you can review the relative color difference between the sample and the standard. There were definitely growing pains there, but all in all, we found this to be a way more efficient process of reviewing colors, and it still is very reliable and accurate. There were definitely a lot of concerns for product, out of the gate, but as we worked with them, we received a few summits in person. We were to double check and confirm that everything we saw on screen was matching in person. And then all in all, ultimately it made their lives easier. It was a pretty easy sell at the end of the day because we were able to say, hey, you guys used to spend an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours a week down here in a light box, looking through all the different samples and trying to, wrap your head around the colors and what's going on. And nowadays it's an instant review process where we get the submit, we email it to them, and if they have any feedback, they can relay that same day instead of having to take multiple days to go back and forth, come into the office, ship samples back and forth. So
Sure.
we've been very fortunate. Yeah. So to wrap it up, I'd say had good good groundwork laid by my predecessors, but we're able to parlay that with just I'd say building good relationships with designers and showing them up front some of the really strong benefits of our digital and on-screen color.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and so just to back up a little bit for what he's referring to as CAP, for those of you who aren't aware of it, CAP is Nativic has a certification accreditation program called CAP, and we go in and certify supply chains, look at their process all the way from their people, like their infrastructure, to their people skills, and just analyzing the entire facility there to give brands some confidence that this supplier knows what they're doing, right? They take tests, they do things, they run exercises. They're making sure that these suppliers really know what they're doing, because not receiving that physical lab dip, you have to have trust with that supplier. And so brands don't always have time to go out and do audits of all the facilities themselves. And so Nativic does have an accreditation program where we go and we look at supply chains and figure it out. And so Brownie here is one of our CAP suppliers, who I will say, actually, I give him credit for convincing me to go digital, because North Face did not do digital until I visited Brownie at his at Swiss Tex, and they changed our minds, right? And they convinced us. They're the ones who showed me what it's about and said, you have to try this. I was not a believer. I will tell you that. I was not a believer at first. It took me convincing, right? And I did it, and I will never turn my head. Like, I'll never go backwards now. So Brownie, yes, you've changed my mind to go digital. But for Swiss Tex, I don't know this, and I'm curious. Did you guys, as you made me at the North Face go digital, but did a brand force you to go digital, or did you guys start it and then convince brands? Like, how did Swiss Tex get going in convincing people to rely on digital data?
So I basically started about a little bit more than 20 years ago with experimenting with digital, because that's when we got our first Spectro. And like you said, we are from the supplier side, so we're manufacturing, and manufacturing is based on tolerances. Everything has a tolerance, and like Brandon explained, and also things, then the color is a subjective and an opinion of the observer. So the tolerance in a visual tolerance field is very, very difficult to get to know. It takes a lot of experience, and it's objective. So manufacturing, everything has tolerances. So I was like, color doesn't have a tolerance. How can that be? This is our business. How color can not have a tolerance? And then with the Spectre, I saw, okay, there is the tolerance. It's a pass, it's a fail. So that's where we need to go. So I started measuring colors, and first in the QC, and then later on down the line, we started measuring even out of the dye machines now. And it really basically now over time completely streamlined the approval process, because before we got sometimes rejections where it was a delta E 0.4 or below, and we got a rejection. And I was like, how can it be, right? I mean, we must look at something different, or the viewer of the color had a completely different opinion of what I had, what would be good, you know. So that was very, very difficult to manage, because you never were sure what you produced could actually be shipped.
Yeah.
Because you were always on that subjective end, the end, is it okay to ship? Yeah, in my opinion, it is. And the instrument says yes. But the observer on the other side maybe had a bad day, or, you know, that's when different people see color different, you know, that this is just reality. And older person, I think, has a tendency to see the color more reddish.
Mhm.
Or other person that they see the color different. So in manufacturing, that was a huge problem. So I really pushed it, and then luckily, a bit more than 10 years ago, Under Armour came and said, hey, look, that's what we want. We want it digital. And I was like, great, that's exactly what we need.
Good.
So
Yeah. So you had it, the idea, and started doing all the work behind it, and then brand started to catch on, I feel like.
yeah, because it was before we dealt with a lot of local and small customers, and they didn't have the infrastructure from like an Under Armour or a brand, and so they were all in-house color approvals, visual, and then Under Armour, they really pushed the subject and went to where we had to go.
Yeah, they were able to see the vision. And, you know, I think that color teams, like the color team, the quality team at a brand often gets this technical point of view of why digital is better. But I found and find that designers often are not, right? Like the digital lab dips are kind of unsettling for some, and designers really like that tactical feel of that physical lab dip. They want to see it, they want to do it. You know, numbers don't mean anything to them. So I don't know, like Carol and Brendan, from a like quality point of view, what kind of things have you done to help those designers? Like, I'm sure you have new designers that come in that, you know, yes, this is your process, but they are going to say something and try to fight it. Like, what are things that you can tell them that have helped them accept it, I guess, that this is the way it's done at your companies?
So one of the things that we did was we had to do a show and tell to review with our designers and show our top colors for a season, and where, you know, it's really great in the Natific software. You can review your physical lab dips, and you can review multiple lab dips at one time and how they all plot on the color grid. And so what we would do is we would show those, you know, how they plot on the grid, and then have the physical lab dips right next to the grid so that they can see, you know, okay, these all fall right around that bullseye center standard. This is where the lab dip falls as a digital value, and then this is what it actually looks like as a physical swatch, and that really helped to, you know, give them that confidence that that this information is accurate. And then also, it, you know, just and this is really our 4th season that we're working in the system, so it does take time, and it does take time to build the metrics and to show more of those details with regards to the confidence level of approving these lab dips, but just showing how much quicker we can get to the approval, and then just the accuracy of those approvals is really important. What we've been able to also show with design is that by being able to approve lab dips sooner and quicker, we're able to have approved lab dips for review when we have our sales sample our sales meetings, and we're reviewing our sales samples. Whereas in the past, you know, sales samples were never color accurate. So, you know, again, it's showing that the chart versus the lab dip approvals, and just picking those, you know, select key colors and key materials, but then also having those approved in time for the sales meeting so that they can review the actual color on product. And so we just had our fall 24 sales meeting, and we've heard very few issues with regards to color discrepancies, where in the past it was all over the place. So I think that, you know, they're slowly getting more and more confident, but it has been a challenge, and especially for colors that tend to have metamerism issues and things like that, where they may look one way in one light source, and then they see them in the, you know, the sample room or the fit room, and they're like, oh, this color's horrible. Like in fall 23, we had to drop a full color just because it didn't execute the way that designers had expected. But yeah, it's just, it takes time, and you do have to kind of show, but the numbers don't lie. And so that's really what we've been working on is ways to kind of prove the efficacy. And I'm sure it's a lot easier to prove like on the production side, but with the design side, those are some of the things that we've had to do.
Good. Yeah. I suggest you probably keep all that stuff, because every time there's a new design director or something who comes in with another, you know, from a different background, you're going to have to keep repeating yourself. But yeah, show them that it works.
Yep. Especially for those almond butter / khaki / forest olive / like every season we have to pick a new lovely metamerism issue color. So
neutral metamerism color. Yes. Brendan, I'm sure the experience is probably similar for you guys at Under Armour, but I know you guys, you know, have had this process established, and, you know, your color team has been, the core has been there for a while. So do you still run into these issues? I think you're on mute still.
Yes, every now and again, and then especially when we get a new teammate or, you know, new designer, new director on board, they're, you know, not very familiar with the whole, you know, cap or the process of mills approving colors. That obviously makes them really nervous out of the gate. They, as you're saying, they love to see the physical, you know, the little lab dips. But over time, I would say my biggest, I think, key to success is building like strong relationships with designers and just building that trust, you know, time and time again. So it will be a little frustrating up front, you know, when you're telling the designer, no, I promise you, this is a perfect match to the standard. And you'll have to go through that exercise of show and tell, kind of just proving that, you know, you can trust us. And I think at the end of the day, the designers don't want to spend all of their time in the light box, double checking. You know, what ultimately the color team's role and responsibility is to make sure that color is accurate and consistent. So once you build that trust and they understand and know that you have this reliable process in place, that's basically, in my opinion, foolproof, they'll slowly but surely come to understand and trust the process. And there's other things that we've also, so not only show and tell, we've also been really good at, make design tools for all of our designers. So we get, you know, little swatches, big color swatches that are available in our color library, so they can very easily see all the different colors available. And that, you know, when we say it's going to match the standard, that's going to be the color they receive. And then ultimately, it's, you know, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but one thing we do here at Under Armour is we do a lot of predicted feasibility testing. So Nativic, we partnered with you guys to basically test up front all of our seasonal colors, and we can predict which ones will have challenges down the road, and we can really focus on those. And, you know, those would be the ones we may need to get in-house or may need to get our eyes on. And those are the ones that if a designer comes in and asks for that, you know, I call it a problematic color, we're more willing to you know, listen to them. But if it's some color that we know is, you know, not a challenge, you know, historically not a problem, no predicted feasibility issues, we really reiterate and stand our ground and say, you know, we really have to trust the process here. And it may leave them a little frustrated that day, but at the end of the, you know, long term, as you're saying, it has so many good benefits, like the consistency, accuracy, timeliness of approval. All of that is a benefit over that one short term, you know, kind of request to see a lab dip in person. So again, ultimately trust and building those good relationships, I think will be very beneficial for you in the long run.
Yeah, and I think you jumped to it, but we made a good point about feasibility. You know, I think that when you go digital, you have to have, you know, it's not just a system that you have to have that's going to make it successful, right? There's other components to it that help make going digital successful, having competent suppliers and having feasible standards, right? As you mentioned, it gives your designers, you know, up front knowing that this color is not going to be achievable, and then they can make adjustments to it. But from Brownie, from a Swiss Tex, like, when you get a color that's feasible to dye, like, how does that help you guys, like, internally at the dye house, produce those lab dips that are better first time around, you know?
I mean, like Brennan said, the feasibility helps a lot to basically to tell us upfront. We don't have to try, I don't know, lab tip over lab tip to figure out if it's actually possible on that fiber or if it's not possible, because certain colors on certain fabrications are simply not achievable on with the feasibility, you know, upfront, that everybody knows upfront that this is not possible. So in the dye-house, it helps tremendously. The help that everybody understands certain colors are not feasible on certain fabrications.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole system basically allows us also that when the lab tip is measuring is digitally by the numbers, that the lab tip will be approved, that it can go into production. Whereas before, when a lab tip got sent in, and it's the same process again with the visual objectivity. So with that system, the lab tip we know he passes, he gets approved.
Yeah.
So then he can move into production. On that time savings, that's tremendous. We're talking about months from time savings down to sometimes it could be done within a week, you know, when you have the feasibility and everything, it could be done within a week from color to production.
Yeah,
So
and that's probably, you know, you probably like, well, obviously you like that as the, you know, dye house, but is it when someone gives you a color and it's not feasible and you're producing on your fabrics, it's not feasible, and they keep rejecting it and rejecting it and rejecting it, and you just keep going back and forth trying to explain to them, do you find, like, how many times do you find it takes you to try to explain to them that this is the best they're going to get before they're willing to accept it? Do you feel like it takes you a month or so to get that done?
yeah, sometimes a month, sometimes even more.
Yeah.
We had times it took 2-3 months to get the customer convinced. Yeah, it's really not doable. Or you end up with this kind of metamerism because you tried to match something which was not the same substrate. And so all these issues, yeah, it basically took all these mudding the waters, all this stuff away, and made a clear path for
Why?
production, you know, to move in a speed where you very competitive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that giving, it helps as a brand to give your suppliers feasible standards. It helps, and you then as the brand know what you're expecting, and you can trust them when they say it's not possible, right? Because I think as a brand, a lot of times you get the mindset of, is it not possible, or do they not want to do it? Like, does it cost them too much money? Like, what is the real answer as the brand? And so I think knowing up front that it's not possible also will have the brand, be able to accept it hopefully faster as well, because they're aware of what they're giving you, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. So in all of digital color, like we've talked about some of the wins that we've had by moving to digital, the advantages. Are there anything else that you guys want to touch on? Like, I know, Carol, like you guys have done some good metrics on getting things approved faster. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so basically, like I said, this is our 4th season. We're just starting spring 25 in the system. And what we've found is that when we started the process for our fall 23 season, our average days to approve lab dips was somewhere around 90. So a lot of that was getting mills onboarded, also, figuring out the integration between our PLM system and the system, and just making sure we had the right colors and materials in the system for lab dipping. So that number quickly improved to about 60 days on average to approve lab dips. This last season, we were in the closer to 50, and that number improving has a lot to do with our process improvements, and then also how much we're reaching out to suppliers to remind them of our deadlines and needing to get lab dips approved. But we've also been able to onboard more and more of our suppliers. So like I said, we're down to there's maybe about 10% of the colors fabrics that we're lab dipping are being managed outside of the system. So hopefully, as we go into spring 25, we have been seeing some data that shows that, like, if it's visual approvals that we're not having to review as an FSRR or a best can do scenario, we are, right around that 30-day average days to approve, with some suppliers being much faster than that. But we're still learning, and we're still gathering data, and then just making sure that the data that we're collecting is accurate, and not, muddled with a lot of the junk that's still in the system, for lab dips that have been requested, but then end up not being used, and those sorts of things. But yes, it's definitely an improvement, and it's been great. And the biggest benefit for us is, like I said, just being able to see accurate color at sales sample production time, because with our decreasing calendars and times that we get to approve things, a lot of time our bulk buys or our production buyers are being made before we've even seen sales samples. So we really need to trust that color is accurate, because mills and our factories are already going ahead and making production product that, if we're having to pull the plug once they've already started because the color is not correct, we're in trouble. So we've been able to avoid a lot of those extra costs.
Yeah, and I think you've said to me once that, like, your sales sample approval rate, like the number of colors that were approved in time for sales sample, has dramatically increased from the suppliers that were doing digital data versus the ones that were not doing it, right? Like you were.
Yep, it's something like 30% approved by sales sample production versus now we're at like closer to 70%. So it's really dramatic, and even just in the less than 2 years that I've been on the team, it's really helped. And Brendan, what you were saying about, like, the person having to enter everything into the system and managing all those, binders and all of that stuff. What ASAP also does, it just helps really have a clean way of tracking your lab dips. There's a dashboard, so you can see what's still pending, and, just like the number of lab dips that are approved on that first try versus multiple tries. So it's just a really nice way to gather all of that data in one place. It makes it really easy to get those metrics.
Yeah, I kind of overlook how helpful just the ASAP system itself is, of just being a database for all of our lab dips and comments and approvals. So
and testing.
We've taken
and so ASAP is our lab dip. It's our development platform. It tracks lab dips first to production. The suppliers have access to it, so there's no more emails, back and forth communication. Everything's tracked on the submit, which is great, because if one person sends an email about something and then they're out sick for a while, nobody else knows what's going on because they don't have access to their email. So everything's kind of tracked in one system for them. But as one thing that Carol mentioned was getting suppliers on board. It helps. Obviously her days are going to get better and better the more suppliers get onboarded and they get comfortable. But I do find that brands often come to me and they're worried about convincing a supplier to go digital. I think it's a no-brainer. They think it's a no-brainer, but there's a lot of investment that a supplier needs to make. So Brownie, what are tips that we can say to suppliers to help convince them that this is the way they need to go? It's a big investment, a conditioning cabinet, a spectrophotometer, they're not cheap. And so, it's always a matter of we want, brands want suppliers to purchase this stuff for the smaller supply chain. But there's resistance. I don't know.
I mean, the investment the supplier has to make, like you mentioned, conditioning cabinet, Spectro, software which comes to it, that's a small investment compared to the return you get when you know that you don't have, then you get less reworks, because with the digital system you end up with less rework, because your production process gets checked from Nativic through the CAP system first, gets checked if you have reliable enough suppliers, if your chemistry works, if the processes are stable enough to run the system. And through that alone, to saving on the rework, that pays off for the investment 10 times, 20 times within no time.
So that's what we should focus on telling them, that they, even if they think that it's a big investment, if they have to build a whole separate section, they're going to save it right away from all the reworks that they're going to have to do and the communication process of it. Okay. Good to know, because I think every time we have brands starting and trying to get, and it's not just the equipment investment, if brands want a supplier to get certified, right? That's a major expense for them as well that they have to do and keep up year after year. And, it's how to convince these suppliers, like what makes it worth it, right? So
I would add, that it's universal. Well, you can be used universally across different brands. So if Under Armour is in the Nativic portal, and Adidas, North Face, it can be shared across different brands. So you're not having to pay an additional fee for all the different companies you work with, which I find a huge benefit.
That is true. Like the certification is, a one-time thing where they get it and it's good for all who want to acknowledge it and accept it. And I think that does help as long as these suppliers work with, other brands that use it. I think it's when now it's starting, there's like some smaller suppliers out there. And I think it's harder for the smaller suppliers to wrap their heads around the expense of it. And it's good to know, like from a supplier point of view, like, it's going to be worth it at the end for you guys, that's good to know. So other things that, big topics in the industry is about, transparency right now into the supply chain, trying to see what they're doing. How has using digital software given you guys any transparency into your supply chain? Like, how are you using digital data to run reports or anything like that?
I'll go ahead and we're using it in a bunch of different ways, but been really helpful with tracking and prioritizing lab dips. So, each month we place a buy, a certain number of styles. You need to have color approval, fit approval, etc. And using it for that has been really helpful as a way to track and prioritize lab dips that are going to be on the upcoming buys or past due, and really alerting the mills that those are going to be the ones they need to focus on first. And in addition to that, at the end of the year, we do a meeting with all of our top suppliers, and we share a report card. And this provides their days to cap, their average days to cap, and then their average days or their submits approved on time. So these are the two data points that we review, and we look at it year over year. So we're just checking to see if the mill is making improvements against itself. And ultimately, these, this info, all this data, are they submitting lab dips on time? Are they, are they getting A's on their report card? This is all shared with our sourcing partners, and that helps to influence our future strategy. So we can prioritize mills that are, performing well on the color side of things, or we can deprioritize someone who's not as responsive or not as cooperative. So those have given us some transparency, but of course there's still a lot of things that they do that we may not get as much visibility to as we'd like. So,
but I like that you share it with the sourcing partners, because I think that's huge. Just to feel like often in the the world of color, like you feel like color's the last priority sometimes on things, even though I think it's the first thing a customer sees when they look at a style. They don't necessarily see a style. They might like see a color that draws their attention to something in the store, right, that they go look at. But, definitely fabric in your guys' companies is huge. Like the technical aspects of the fabric have to be good. But I think color is really important, and to know for your suppliers to know that you are giving that information back to your sourcing partners, who are the ones who are going to make the decision if they get the orders or not, is probably, enough to want them to keep improving upon themselves as well.
Yeah, hopefully it gives them a little, incentive. But that's the point. Our fabrics can be, doesn't matter how advanced or innovative our fabrics are. If the color, if the consumer doesn't like the color, they're not going to buy it. So
yeah, exactly. So, and Brownie, you guys internally at SwissTex use some of our systems to monitor all your production lots and things like that. So when you're managing that, how are you, give us an idea of what why you're reading all your fabric, all your lots in there, and how you analyze that data to help make decisions on like how you're going to make these improvements so that your customers like Under Armour and North Face, you know, you can keep improving for them.
Yeah, so I use the color warehouse basically on a daily basis. We monitor the colors, how the colors behave consistency wise, how the lot to lot performance is. And when there are issues like about so a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, we had to make a change because some of our colors didn't reproduce the way we wanted, and we had too many reworks. So I introduced actually a new die range system, which improved that the color performance from lot to lot, and other issues with the colors also. Because when you dye, for example, a lot of different cotton yarns, you get different depths on the color, and with a better dye range, we could reduce these issues with color performance. And the color warehouse was really the tool to see these issues with the color, because it's so easy displayed how the color behaves with the little dots on the circle or on the ellipse, however the tolerance is. And when you're basically shooting darts and it's all over the place, then you know you have a problem. So then you can start and addressing that problem and make a change. So the color warehouse from the software from that standpoint is really, it's a great tool. Before he had to lay out shade cards over the table and then look with the standard go to the shade card, or it was very difficult. Now with the digital display and that tool, it's the decisions are easier to make a change than before. Before we were always hesitant, or should we make a change? Or it was very difficult. Now with this tool, it made it much easier to make these decisions.
Yeah, I think that's really good that I need to remember to talk to suppliers about, because, you know, you can look at Color Warehouse as our production platform, and, you know, for brands, I think it adds your transparency because the suppliers upload all their dye lots to it, so you see how everything is going. But really, it has so much value in it for that supplier as well. Like, they're uploading it, but they can see when they're shifting and they need to make adjustments and things like that. They shouldn't just be uploading and closing their eyes to it, right? Like, you have to sit there as a supplier and analyze what's going on. If it's digital data, you're not producing them their shade lots to the brand, or their, you know, shade bands anymore to the brands, but you should be looking at that online and making sure that you are staying not just accurate, not just within the tolerance, because you don't want to be all over the plot, right? But you have to be consistent as well, and like making sure that you're producing those consistent results. So I think that is a really, you know, big benefit that we should keep highlighting to suppliers as well. And for brands, for you guys to highlight to suppliers, right? That they should be, you know, yes, they have to upload the lots, but there's a reason why. It's for transparency for you, so you can see what's on the floor, but it's also to help them, right? And so we'll go back to a little bit, talking about, I think we touched on a little bit at self-approval. And for those who don't know, a lot of brands these days are allowing suppliers to self-approve submits, whether it be lab dips or production, right? It's saving time. They're with digital data, like they're allowing to do it, because brands still have that transparency. They can still see what their lots are, what their color looks like without receiving it. But they're allowing suppliers to make their own decisions on improving things that are within tolerance. So I guess from a brand point of view, and just to help people understand, like, what are things you're considering when you're trying to decide if a supplier should be allowed to be self-approve, right? Because it's going to benefit the supplier. They're not going to have to ship things anymore. You as a brand don't have to review things anymore. They're uploading it digitally and they're going and they're shipping. Like, what are things that you're looking for to make sure it's okay for a supplier to do that? Brennan, I think you might be on mute if you're trying to respond.
That's me. Yep. So I would say, I mean, easy answer is we would like to push every supplier to go cap, self-approval if we can, but obviously that's not feasible or cost effective for all of them. So we would say, looking at like volume, we would definitely want to prioritize mills with the highest volume or that do like a lot of solid color development. We would really, really push them. So recently we had a sock partner who for the longest time, I've been here for 7 years, they've always been visual and it's a lot of very solid colors, but we were able to convince them recently to start the cap process. And while there's been growing pains along the way, I think they've already realized like some amazing benefits. And ultimately they're going to start adopting it. So they started with one location and they're going to expand it into more and more. Mm-hmm. There are definitely the suppliers on the flip side who, are new to the, maybe new to the supply chain, have a very small amount of lab dip requests. So in those cases, we share the information, and if this is something that they internally are willing to do without, our much, push from us, we're more than welcome to, assist and support. But for the smaller suppliers, if they're not exactly on board, again, we'll always remind them and everything. But if you're only doing a couple of dozen lab dips a season, it's hard for us to make that, to explain to them or really get them on board. But utilizing some of the stuff that Veronica said earlier, how it ultimately can be used across the different brands and helps with the reworks. And in the short term, it is a high dollar cost, but in the long run, it will really pay off. So we're honestly looking at this to sum it up, the high volume suppliers are going to be the ones that are going to have to get, and from us, we're really forcing them to do self-approval. And then if you're a newer supplier, we'll grant you some grace period. But after a couple seasons, frankly, we're going to expect you to be able to self-approve. And if not, we'll probably look to deprioritize you from the supply chain because our processes now are starting, the larger company is starting to kind of adapt the calendar across our ability to, make quick color approvals. So if you're unable to support that, then, frankly, you're not going to fit too well into our business. So really,
for you guys to allow them to self-approve, you really are looking for them to be certified. Then there's not like they have to prove anything. You want to make sure that they've gone through, have the equipment, things like that. Yeah,
and to that point, yes, they need to be certified through the CAP certification program. So having that on-site evaluation, making sure you're constantly recapping. So there are different levels to CAP approval, starting from I think 1 to 5. And just making sure that our mills are constantly, striving for that next level. And if we see that they're starting to fall off, or there's definitely suppliers that are, CAP approved, but ultimately don't follow the directions fully, we will actually suspend their approval rights, and we will ask them to submit everything visually. So, it's not like, once you get approved, you're good for life. You got to continue to, meet our high expectations. And if not, we will, we have no problem with,
take it away.
taking away from you, you got to behave. So,
yeah, there you go. And so, Carol, I know that you guys have started to, give suppliers more self-approval rights, and it's not necessarily just CAP certification, but there's certifications you do. What were the key components that you're looking for to say, yes, the supplier is good to self-approve? Like, what are those things that you as a brand want to be able to see that they have, that they can perform, or what are those items?
A lot of it is consistency. We also have our global teams that help to validate, the suppliers and make sure that they have completed the certification process. Another thing that we include with the self-approval is we make sure that the suppliers are providing testing data, so color fastness data, so that we can be sure that we're not approving a color that in production is going to have poor color fastness to light or washing results. So just making sure that the mills that we're giving that self-approval privileged to, I guess you could say, they're including that testing data, and they're also reviewing that prior to the approval in-house. So, but yeah, it's consistency, it's reliability of the partners, and then also just working closely with our global teams to go into the mills and just make sure that they're following, the protocol for that self-approval process.
Yeah, good. And Brownie, as a supplier, do you feel like more brands are allowing you guys to self-approve these days, or is it, there's still lots that need to embrace the reality that in order to improve timing and everything like this, that they should allow suppliers to self-approve?
There are more brands, they allow us to self-approve, but it's still, there's still a lot more to go, because still a lot of brands still rely on the visual, or see, even sometimes we get this, they go like an in-between, digital, but still visual confirmation, so there is still
testing.
this hesitancy around not to trust the system, not to, like I mentioned before, it's a trust. There needs to be the trust from the brand in its supply chain. Can the brand or the customer trust the supply chain enough to basically let them allow to approve color, which is very important for a brand. That's one of those things they sell, is color, right? So to get that trust, that's why the CAP system is so important. The CAP system gives the trust, because there's a certification behind it, and there's a recapping behind it, that the supplier is up to date with technology, with the new standards, because technology is moving on. It's always moving. There is always new things, so we have to adapt.
Yeah,
And this
it's not just a
recap then
one-time
also
thing.
forces the supply chain, yeah, exactly, to adapt and move forward.
Yeah, and so there are more, but yes, there's still room because there are still many visual valuations out there. But also, I mean, within your companies, I'm sure, are there still items that aren't reviewed digitally that you guys, I know that, as more the industry keeps pushing to be more and more everything going, and back when I did color, like heathers were never thought of to be a digital review, and now they can be. Are there any other items that are still kind of like you're trying to push it towards that way, but it hasn't got there yet?
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, the headers, they were one thing. Now we are reading headers since years, and we have very good success with structured header, not random headers. That's still not possible with a conventional spectro. But the structured headers, yes, we read this every day since years. The next thing is what we started, it's also a couple of years ago now, is white, bleach optical white. And this is still, it's a technology which is still in the beginning steps, because very few brands till now actually adapted it and trusted it. It's kind of like the last thing coming on to become digital, because the whole hardware and the standardization of the hardware and the calibration is very, very tricky and very important in that reading the bleach optical whites is very, very tricky.
Yeah, I agree on that one, actually, that I do feel like there are still brands that might have everything read digitally, but whites, they still aren't, comfortable enough to let them, because they just think that they don't correlate. Like your traditional white, the values that give you the white readings, like your normal DECMC is not always translate well to whites, right? And so I think people are just having a hard time embracing that the digital read for white doesn't align with what they see, what they see and things like that. But yeah. Brendan, at Under Armour, are there still certain products that you guys can't review digitally yet that you're looking forward to figuring out a way to? get there?
Yeah, so we're lucky. We got our wrapped our minds around white digital approval a couple of months, maybe a year or so ago. So that's been good. We've been able to successfully read in some heathers for a few years now. We have a special program for that. It's not an across the board approval, but we've had a lot of success with trim suppliers. So basically a lot of our trim suppliers are now become CAP accredited, and that's everything from heat seals to zipper tapes, etc. But they're actually adjusting or changing the way they submit the color so that it can be read digitally. Instead of submitting it on the zipper or in that final trim form, if you get it in a flat piece, then you're able to measure it successfully. And the thing I'm most excited for over the next couple months and potentially a couple years is going to be digital print or spectral print review. So we're really trying to find a way to measure all of our print colors in digitally. That's for us been to this day the most challenging kind of development. It's has special artwork, multiple colors. Colors are kind of laid on top of one another and affect the overall appearance when they sit next to one another. So we've started some initial pilot tests, ran into some speed bumps, but ultimately we think there's a way of doing it. You can print the solid swatch of each color and then review those, and we're getting towards a somewhat successful, I would say, point, but there's still a lot of testing that needs to be done.
Good. That's promising. There's always these items that people are like, we can't read this digitally. We can't read this. And it's like, yes, we're going to get past this eventually. We're going to be able to.
In my opinion, at some point, you should be able to read every color in digitally. There should be no need for an eyeball.
Yeah.
Future.
Yeah. Carol, do you have anything to add to that about any challenges you guys have had, or?
So we haven't tackled, or I guess mastered, the whole print, heather, and trim component yet. We are looking into trims initially and just seeing how that goes, and have had to modify our plan on how we want to do it to attack that. But we're still reviewing heathers and prints visually, which takes some extra time. But at least we're able to track that process in the Natific software, which does help to keep our suppliers submitting lab dips and doing it in a timely way. The other thing is, we do a lot of synthetic materials, but some of our partner brands that do a lot more wool have been having some struggles with Natific and just ensuring that accuracy of color match, mainly because a lot of that is a heather material as well, but some substrates just don't work as well with the digital approvals as others. So we have been working through that also.
Yeah, keep going. It will get there. You'll get there, I think, internally. But, and then, I know that at Under Armour, you guys use now, there is a way on some of our platforms to upload pictures and to see the color on screen. What have you guys, there's the whole conversation of on-screen color, that's the next step, right? That's where challenges now lie. Have you, I don't know, what are your thoughts on the on-screen color and where you're on it with, where you're at with looking at it and the challenges you faced?
Yeah, so we've just started to wrap our brains around on-screen color and really started to try to formalize a process and some sort of best practices around it. So we've put together a color excellence committee, and I would say this has been a really successful approach. So we've led by the color team, the color excellence committee. We've basically recruited members from every department of the organization that utilizes some sort of on-screen color. And this has been a lot wider reaching than we originally thought. So we initially started with design and marketing, but we came out to find that people in communications are using, are adjusting color on screen and utilizing our color swatches, to color up products for websites or for marketing or Instagram. So basically the first step was identifying all of the key stakeholders nominating someone from their team to then be kind of the liaison. And then from there, we are identifying all of the different software and hardware and systems they utilize the color in. So, very, Illustrator, V-Stitch, or things like that. And then from there, formalizing the best color space. So, this is where we're just kind of starting to, scratch the surface. But like, do we do Adobe RGB or, RGB 98, different color spaces? What's the best lighting for an on-screen color? And ultimately, once we formalize all of these best practices, we'll be able to publish it to the company and share with everybody. Hey, if these are the software you're using, this is the color space, this is the monitor calibration that you need to have, the settings you need to have. So setting it up so that they have, I guess, a really robust way of setting up their computer or whatever screen they're using, and then making sure that it's as reliable and accurate as possible, because every monitor is going to be very different. There are a lot of colors that are just not achievable on screen monitors at the moment. So helping to identify that. But ultimately, we are finding, not only are we've pushed our lab dips, we've created a process where our lab dips can be reviewed on screen color. But if you go onto our website, you'll also see the large majority of our product and all of our footwear is going to be shown digitally. There's no longer photos. So it's becoming a really, really prevalent, part of our business, and affecting how, the consumer interacts with the brand. So ultimately, we're hoping that we will be kind of like a subject matter expert within the brand and be able to provide everybody with these, best practice guidelines, and ultimately make it as accurate and repeatable and consistent across the screens as possible. And, from there, build some trust with our designers, because as of today, they all say it's not accurate. We know it's not accurate. It's just a representation. So getting them to switch that mindset into saying, hey, this is pretty darn accurate, but it's not necessarily maybe 100% perfect. But we're getting there. There's been some resistance. We just got to keep plugging away.
I mean, I think you've highlighted that. Yeah, it's not a flip of a switch and easy, like, oh, calibrate your monitor, it's done. There's so many factors into it that I think it's going to take, just as you said, practice and trust, and just keep going through and adjusting things until the industry gets to the point where it's like, yes, this is going to work. But I have hope, and I feel like that's a good direction, for the industry to get to. Does anybody feel like, where is that, besides that, like, where else are you looking for the industry to help optimize your process, to help improve something? Like, any pain points that either as, Brownie as a supplier, or that you guys as a brand are still like after, that you would like, the world of color, all the industry to help work on, to move the next step forward, to help simplify your color process even more?
I think for us, the biggest thing is the connectivity of systems. What Brendan was just talking about is definitely something that we at the North Face have struggled with, the color team, just reviewing that technical color, but our connection with the design team, and then with marketing, and with e-com, and prints, and just connecting all of the different color tools. So on that front end, but then also on the back end with regards to connecting the ASAP software system, with our PLM system, and the ordering systems, and just making just linking all of these different systems together. We're still having to piece a lot of that information together in order to make sure that lab dips and colors are approved on time for certain buys and things like that. So for us, that's a big part of it, is just connecting all the system. Like, we can do our part, but it's how we connect to the greater organization, that it would be really helpful to have something in place that makes that process a little bit easier.
Good to know. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's very important. I'd say we're going through our systems, having a very reliable system is very, very important. And we're going through a bit of a change here. We're trying to change PLM systems and working through the integration. And so Natific, I will say, shout out, they've been very supportive and helpful and are able to do all the testing in the test environments that we need, making sure it's going to work when we have inevitably, hit play. And that's something that easily gets overlooked, just making sure that those lab dips are connected and, being passed along from one system to a next. And because when that does, when that doesn't happen, it often creates, an email or an emergency, someone's got to scramble to fix something. So
yeah,
that's been clutch. And then on-screen color and digital print color for me, just those are my big focus, and looking to wrap my head around that and hopefully find a a good process for that we can share and kind of publish for everybody to partake
looking
in.
forward to that.
Yeah.
And Brownie, how about you for as a supplier, what are your pain points still? I mean, I would assume it's getting more people to adopt digital color still and embrace it, right? Anything else on your side?
Yeah, you pretty much nailed that one. Yeah, it's basically to get it universally accepted that digital color is the way to approve color. That's the goal, that it's really universally accepted. That's the standard. We came a long way already. I mean, it's way further than 10 years ago. I mean, there's no comparison, but there's still a long way to go, and that's really the challenge, to make it universally accepted, digital color.
Yeah, agree. That's what, we're here to help help you with that. So I would like, I see there's a couple questions in the chat, so we're going to go through those. If you have any more questions, feel free afterwards to add them to chat, or, speak out or raise your hand. There is a question in here that I'm just on the bottom right now for Brendan. Explain more about how you evaluate heathers digitally. Is there a different way that you do heathers versus how you do solids?
Yes. So we instituted, it was like, we called it the, I think it was like reserve, basically it's a pilot program. I forget the exact naming behind it at the moment, but it's a very specific, we've identified very specific suppliers and material types that are able to successfully, be measured in. And so right now what we're actually doing is we're just comparing the production lots to the approved lab dips. So that way for continuous production, they can continue, operating efficiently in a fast-paced manner, and don't have to continue to send that in or check the shade lots or shade bands. Yeah. So again, it's definitely not a universal or across the board process for heathers. That is still something we need to work a lot more on, and the large majority of our heathers are still reviewed visually, or I would say actually virtually, or via virtual submit.
Thank you. And then there's from Carol Rebels. Hi, Carol. I didn't know you were on here. She wants to know, how do others handle digital data for light colors dyed on optically brightened fabrics? So maybe, I don't know, Brownie, do you have any insights on that?
So yeah, that's an issue when the standard doesn't have OBA. That will be an issue to digital do that.
Mm-hmm.
That is an issue. Carol, I don't know if you have anything on that one.
Yeah, with lighter colors, optical brighteners, I mean, that's definitely something that we hear about, especially with the color standard providers that we select, and we'll hear information from all of our suppliers with regards to that and color and constancy. But so what we've been doing as a result is reviewing a lot of those visually.
Are there any other questions from the audience? You can feel free to unmute yourself and just ask it if you'd like.
Anybody in here? No? Okay.
No, Carol rebels. It's not just you. Everyone has issues with it still.
I've got a question. Can you get close to the mic? I think you need to get close to the mic.
Oh, yes. Hello.
Somebody's talking. Hang on.
Yep.
In general, what are the tolerance levels for other approvals? Color approvals. Okay. That was the question.
Sorry, Maria, can you repeat that question?
In general, what are the tolerance levels for color approvals? Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, I'll say we have our 3 standard light sources, so daylight, store light, and incandescent A. And we do a 1.0 delta E for daylight, 1.3 for store, and 1.5 for incandescent. So loosen the tolerance slightly as you kind of go down.
And we're right around a 1.0 for all 3. We look primarily in daylight and store lighting.
Yeah, I do find a lot of our brands hover around like 1.0 for their main light source. Some go a little bit lower to like 0.8, but definitely 1.0 seems to be more of the industry standard. And then in the different light sources, when they get to the second and third, they do expand them a little bit.
And I would say some people ask about quadrant control when it comes to digital color. We don't even have to go that route because at a 1.0 we find our tolerance is so tight that even if it skews left or right of the axis, then they'll still line up when you're looking visually. So
yeah,
some random designer will hear about that and they'll bring it up, but all in all, you can rest easy that if you have that tolerance, you'll be just fine.
and what I tell brands when they want to go to quadrant control, you're really you're just shrinking your tolerance in general, and you're always going to have things on either side. And if you have, it's not about the same supplier submitting something on the red side versus the green side and they're complete opposite. That's about your supplier learning consistency, right? And being able to control the consistency and not having them submit things all over the place. And so it's really, if you're just going to say I only want it in the red yellow quadrant, you're basically cutting off the rest of you're just cutting your tolerance shorter. And so you're still going to have differences from one end to the other of a tolerance. It's just moved up into a quadrant instead. And so, yeah. But, there are people who do want to specify quadrants. And I don't know, Brownie, is there, as a supplier, is that when someone specifies a quadrant, like what does that mean for you? Like how does that impact what you have to do?
Yeah, it cuts the tolerance field way down dramatically. Could make it half or sometimes a quarter when it's really into a quadrant. The tolerance field becomes a quarter. So your rework rate in manufacturing definitely will go up because you will have more fallouts to fit such a tight tolerance field. So it's and then you're looking at the delays on increased cost. Basically, that's what you end up with.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
There's another question about tolerance for prints if evaluated digitally. So if are your prints, I guess, Brendan, you guys have done some prints, digitally. Do those have the same tolerances as your solids?
It's a slightly wider tolerance, so we're still in the process of nailing down what that exact number is, but it's likely going to be somewhere around a 2.0 delta E. It will be a little higher than our dyed goods, and while that is obviously like a little concerning, we do know visually we've approved colors on prints that are well within a 2 delta E, so we have a much wider tolerance visually for prints, so we should also, I think, expect that slightly wider digital tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say ultimately we're really just looking at it under daylight, so that's all we've really reviewed our prints under visually. So flip side, same for the digital, but we're still trying to nail down that exact number. Ultimately, the end goal is to make sure that if the print color is sewn next to a solid color, that there will be no noticeable difference. Ultimately, if they are seamless, then I think it's going to be a success.
Okay, thanks. There's another question, and then I see a hand raised as well. So the last question in the chat is, how are you guys managing like the change in lighting to LEDs? Like, is anybody looking into that, changing light sources yet?
I'm inquiring. So like we've had, funny you asked, we had our X-Rite technician here calibrating our light boxes yesterday. So just over the, our conversation, the topic of LEDs came up. I personally believe that that's kind of like where the industry's, like the lighting is, every light bulb I see, every new light bulb is LED. All of our stores, all of our offices, I think that's kind of where everyone's moving. Unfortunately, there is no standardized LED light that's really been, I guess, accepted or adopted by the industry. So there have been some, I guess, I don't know if anyone's heard about, like there's Walmart has had some success with standardizing the LED. So we're looking at that one as a potential, option. They have partnered with X-Rite for adopting or installing light bulbs in their actual light boxes. But the big thing for us is going to be getting that spectral curve, that digital curve of the light, so that we can continue to do digital approvals. So, getting that physical light standardized is great, but we'll also need that in a digital form as well for everything we've been talking about today. But I still think we're months, if not years away from getting, a final decision there.
Carol, what about you guys? Any looks into LED lights yet? No, I'm just gonna leave it as is for now.
Yeah.
All right.
Let us know. But yeah, we haven't looked at it yet.
Yes, it's a next beast to tackle later on. Kristen, hi. I see your hand up. How are you?
Kelly, I'm good. How are you?
Good.
This has been awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I have a question for Brendan and I have a question for Brownie. Brendan, do you require your suppliers to send in lab dips after they are spectrally approved, like at the end of your season, or do you not request them at all?
No, we do not request them at all. And frankly, if a designer is really, really, really insistent, we will do our best to hold our ground. But it's very rare that we will. It's basically on a request basis if they need to send in a CAP approved item.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And then Brownie, can you give a rough estimate of how much a lab dip costs today? One submit. Years and years ago, I was always given the number of like around $250. And then we've asked some suppliers over the last few years, and it was like anywhere in the neighborhood of $250 to $500 US. What is your perspective on that?
I think that's about an accurate number, somewhere between
Okay.
250 and 500. That's probably a good number, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I was curious because we are trying to be more strategic in our development. And so that is a suggestion that I was given to share with our designers, how much overdevelopment is costing our suppliers and us, essentially.
Yeah, correct.
Thank you. All right, I think there's time for one more question. Thank you, Kristen. I see Keith. Hi, Keith. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good.
Kristen, on that question about cost, look at the AATCC review this month. The issue is just coming out. It's all about cost. And to Brownie's point, as expensive as lab dips are, the cost of rejected first bulk is significantly more. So we actually have a cost calculator you can download from Black Swan Textiles. Fill in your own numbers from your PLM system, customize it to you, and it'll run calculations for how much it's costing you, how much it's costing your vendors, how much it's costing your mills.
Yep, that is good, because when you reject a first bulk, that's a lot more, fabric and everything that goes into it. So that comes harder. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Maria, is there anything else from AATCC?
Thank you very much, Kelly and Carol and Thomas and Brendan. That was a fabulous presentation. I was very impressed I'm easy to impress, but that doesn't mean anything. I think some actual color people were happy, so that's a good thing. Let me share with you just real quick some coming attractions from AATCC. Here's some upcoming educational programs that we have. If anybody is planning to attend any of these, please go ahead and sign up. And if you have any questions on membership, this is me and my team. Please give us a call. We're always happy to talk to our members. And more general questions, the education director, the technical director, and of course our EVP. Again, our staff is always happy to answer your questions. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having us, Maria.
And thank you. Yeah, you guys did a fantastic job. Thank you so much. I think we have one more thing in the chat, do we? Oh, people are saying goodbye.
It is Tom Stacks.
Yeah, I see more like a comment, but I don't know if I see any more questions.
Looks like a lot of just thank yous and how good the discussion was.
Great. All right. Well then, thank you very much.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Have a
everyone.
good evening, everyone.
Thanks. You too. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks. Bye.